He was born in Toxteth, Liverpool, an area where opportunity didn't knock, it kicked doors down. A street kid with an ear for secrets and a mind that memorized every name, every move, every weakness. By the time most young men were deciding on careers, Curtis Warren had already laid the foundation for an empire, one that would stretch from the back alleys of Merseyside to the sunburnt ports of Venezuela, the streets of Amsterdam, the airstrips of Bogotá. They called him Cocky, a name that started as an insult from police officers, but quickly became a badge of respect in a world where reputation meant everything. He never drove a Ferrari. He never wore gold. He didn't pose with piles of cash or sip champagne in clubs. He didn't need to. The real power, the kind that doesn't need to shout, was always his. For years, law enforcement agencies across Europe watched him, followed him, tapped phones, flipped informants. All of them trying to prove what they already believed, that Curtis Warren wasn't just another drug dealer. He was the drug dealer. The one moving tons of product without lifting a single fingerprint. But then something changed. One slip. One overheard word. One surveillance mic buried in a prison wall. And just like that, the most elusive man in British criminal history was cornered. This is the story of power built in silence, of a criminal network so vast it left border agencies overwhelmed. This is the rise, reign, and reckoning of a man once called the British Pablo Escobar. Curtis Warren didn't chase headlines. He built shadows. And now, for the first time, we're following every trace he left behind. The year was 1963. In the heart of Toxteth, one of Liverpool's most volatile and neglected districts, a child was born into a city on fire. Curtis Francis Warren. He would grow up in the shadows of crumbling factories, idle dockyards, and a skyline smudged by smoke and uncertainty. Liverpool was once a titan of trade, a crown jewel of the British Empire's shipping empire. But by the 1960s, it was unraveling. The port jobs were vanishing. The shipyards echoed with silence. And in their place came desperation. Boarded-up windows. Empty wallets. A growing rage. The tension between communities wasn't whispered, it screamed. In Toxteth, racial unrest was not a story in the newspaper. It was lived every single day. Curtis came from a mixed-race family. His mother was white, his father black, a former boxer who demanded respect with his eyes long before his fists. In the streets of Liverpool, that combination meant Curtis wasn't just different. He was marked. He was tested, constantly. And he learned quickly, you either fold, or you fight. At 12, most boys were still dreaming of football. Curtis was already learning how to hotwire a car. A Vauxhall here. A Ford there. Each theft wasn't just a thrill, it was a lesson. Timing. Precision. Escape. It wasn't about joyriding. It was about control. And even at that age, Curtis craved it. The police knew his name before they knew his face. He'd disappear into alleyways before they could blink. He wasn't reckless. He was disciplined, quiet, watching. The adults on the block noticed. Especially the wrong ones. The men who never seemed to work but always had wads of cash, fresh trainers, and enough fear stitched into their smiles that nobody asked where it came from. Liverpool's docks weren't just shipping goods. They were the city's artery to the underworld. Crates went unchecked. Customs agents looked the other way. And for those in the know, the port was a highway for everything the law tried to keep out. Guns. Drugs. Cash. Curtis absorbed it all, like oxygen. The community around him hardened him, but it also trained him. Older boys taught him where to hide stolen goods. Which coppers could be paid off. Which couldn't. How to speak in code. How to say everything with silence. Every day on the streets of Toxteth was a test. And every test Curtis passed made him more dangerous. He never carried himself like the others. While most kids were loud, bragging, quick to fight, Curtis was always still. Studying. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He wasn't trying to be a gangster. He was already thinking like a boss. And when he looked at the men around him, the ones with the flash cars, the mistresses, the backroom deals, he saw something very few boys saw: a path. A system. One that rewarded silence, loyalty, and ambition. And he had all three. Curtis Warren wasn't born with power. He earned it. Every scraped knee, every stolen car, every alley he sprinted through was a brick in the foundation of something no one could see coming. Not yet. In the late 1970s, as Liverpool's music scene exploded and the city throbbed with raw energy, Curtis Warren stepped through the doors of a nightclub and found a whole new world waiting. He was 17. Broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed. Hired as a bouncer, but already watching everything and everyone. The drunks. The dealers. The gangsters in tailored suits who never paid for drinks and left with women on both arms. It wasn't just a job. It was a masterclass in the mechanics of power. This was where Curtis made connections, real ones. The kind that don't get logged in phones or written on paper. He met smugglers who laughed about customs checkpoints. He met fixers who knew how to move anything, anywhere. He listened. And they noticed. He didn't speak out of turn. He didn't flash money. He remembered names, habits, weaknesses. He studied people like chess pieces. And when he finally made his move, it was quiet. Precise. Calculated. His first product was hashish. Nothing flashy. But he moved it faster than anyone expected. Word spread. He didn't just deal, he delivered. On time. No excuses. No middlemen. And always clean. Then came the cocaine. Liverpool was changing again. The docks were still decaying, but a new kind of trade was blooming beneath the surface. Cocaine wasn't just a drug. It was a status symbol. Rich kids wanted it. Celebrities wanted it. And Curtis had a vision. He didn't want to sell to users. He wanted to sell to sellers. By the early 1980s, he was already different. No tracksuits. No Rolex. No reckless shows of wealth. He still lived modestly. Drove a used car. But the money, millions, was stacking. And with it, so was his network. His calm unnerved people. He wasn't loud. He didn't shout. He'd stare at you for 5 seconds longer than felt comfortable. And he always knew more than he let on. The police started hearing his name more often. But there was a problem: they couldn't pin him to anything. No drugs on him. No witnesses willing to talk. No fingerprints. Just a name. And that name was becoming a legend. That's when they started calling him Cocky. It wasn't meant to flatter. It was frustration. He always seemed 2 steps ahead. Arrests fell apart. Cases vanished. Evidence went missing. And when officers tried to rattle him, he'd smile. Not a big grin. Just the kind of smirk that says, "You'll never catch me." And for a long time, they didn't. Curtis Warren wasn't just growing. He was evolving. His network now reached past Liverpool, into Europe, South America, the Caribbean. He wasn't just playing the game. He was rewriting the rules. But even as his empire grew, he never changed his rhythm. No drinking. No drugs. No flashy lifestyle. Just discipline. Silence. Patience. And power. He wasn't trying to be famous. He was building something far more dangerous: invisibility. And while other dealers were getting sloppy, posing with stacks of cash, bragging on tape, trusting too easily, Curtis remained untouchable. But the bigger the empire, the higher the risk. And the higher the risk, the harder the fall. And in the shadows, somewhere between the docks of Liverpool and the clubs of Amsterdam, the clock had already started ticking. They called him cocky because he never ran, never shouted, never blinked when he was caught. But now, decades later, the man once known as Europe's most cunning narco walks free into a world that's changed beyond recognition. And yet, some things never change. Curtis Warren's legend lives in whispers. In Liverpool, old-timers at the docks still speak his name in hushed tones. They recall how a boy from Toxteth rose above the chaos, how he carved an empire without pulling a single trigger himself. To them, Warren wasn't just a criminal, he was a symbol. A contradiction. Ruthless, yet rarely violent. Quiet, yet impossible to ignore. We return to the streets of Liverpool. Graffiti scrawled on the back alleys of L8 reads "Free Cocky," a slogan from the past that somehow never quite disappeared. For many, he's a folk hero. A working-class kid who beat the system. For others, he's the ghost behind ruined families, addiction, and violence that stretched across continents. The full weight of his legacy isn't just in the bricks and kilos moved from South America to Europe. It's in the blueprint he left behind. Today, DEA agents and NCA analysts still study his playbook. His encrypted codes. His method of building faceless, autonomous cells. He never touched the drugs. Never spoke directly to a mule. He didn't need to. His voice was law, passed down through layers of silence. Curtis Warren showed the world that true power doesn't shout, it whispers. But the damage? That still screams. We trace his empire's ripple effect, a teenage overdose in Jersey. A gun murder in Marbella. A nightclub stabbing in Liverpool. All tied, in one way or another, to the silent machinery he built. And still, no paper trail. No signatures. No voice recording since the infamous Jersey sting. We revisit the courtroom in 2009. A jury listening to fuzzy prison cell tapes as Warren talks in metaphors. Puzzles within riddles. Phrases like "5 sheets of that wallpaper" and "send the boys over with the paint." Every word bent under the weight of its double meaning. The judge called him a master of criminal enterprise. His lawyers called it a witch hunt. But even now, authorities admit, he beat the system more times than it beat him. Today, Curtis Warren is under strict conditions. He must report every digital password, bank account, and contact. He's banned from using encrypted messaging apps. Every step he takes is watched. And yet, a luxury villa in Cyprus pops up in public records, owned by an offshore trust linked to an associate of Warren's from the 1990s. A restaurant in Spain rumored to be frequented by his old crew now has a silent investor. A new wave of drug seizures in the UK matches the modus operandi Warren perfected, down to the choice of cargo containers. But when journalists ask, all they get is silence. No interviews. No books. No confessions. Just one blurry photo taken by a tabloid journalist, Warren walking out of a barber shop in Holland, wearing a tracksuit, hands in pockets, half a smile on his face. And just like that, he disappears again. Curtis Warren may be out of prison. But he's never really out of the game. Because some ghosts never rest. Some empires never truly fall. And some names? They echo forever in the underworld. In Toxteth, boys who never met him carry his story like scripture. They hear how he rose from nothing, played chess while the police played checkers, and left courtrooms red-faced with embarrassment. They don't mention the bodies. They don't see the broken homes. They talk about the money. The intelligence. The myth. Curtis Warren became more than a name. He became a symbol of what was possible, if you were clever enough, fearless enough, and willing to never look back. In the backstreets of Liverpool, the older generation remembers a different version of that myth. They watched the changes, the slow erosion of their community as drugs swept through like a plague. Heroin in the 80s. Cocaine in the 90s. A new language of crime took root, and Warren's name was always nearby. Spoken in fear. Spoken in admiration. Spoken in pain. We sit with retired officers who chased him across countries, built cases over years, and watched it all unravel with one procedural error or one clever sidestep by the man they called unbreakable. They don't speak with hatred. They speak with exhaustion. Some admit they respected him. Others never forgave him. A senior NCA official describes him as the most intelligent criminal mind this country has ever produced. He pauses before adding, and the most frustrating. We never caught him with his hands on anything. Just words. Always words. His mother once said, Curtis was always quiet. He watched everything. Took it all in. He didn't start fights. He finished them with silence. To this day, Warren has never expressed regret. Never admitted guilt. Never confirmed the size of his fortune or where it is. Some say it's buried in crypto. Others believe it's hidden in offshore companies, led under false identities. There are whispers of coded notebooks, sealed safety deposit boxes in Luxembourg, diamonds in private vaults. But nothing proven. Liverpool remains divided. Some say he's the product of a broken system. That the poverty, the racism, the boarded-up homes, and the jobless fathers forged him. That he was survival in its rawest form. Others say he made it worse. That he fed on the very pain that made him. That he glamorized destruction, that he traded lives for silence and wealth. A community activist from L8 says it plainly, Curtis Warren didn't build Toxteth. He built an empire on its back. And yet, his legend refuses to die. Books are written. Podcasts dissect his methods. Documentaries analyze every move. Young hustlers mimic his style, low profile, no bling, no loose ends. They call themselves ghost dealers. They don't flash cash. They study. What Curtis Warren taught the underworld was discipline. What he taught law enforcement was patience. And what he taught the country was this: brilliance, ungoverned, is as dangerous as any weapon. He made millions from nothing. Outsmarted some of the world. And so, the story ends, at least for now. Curtis Warren, once the most feared name in the British underworld, now walks among us. No mansion. No sports cars. Just the weight of a legacy that refuses to disappear. But his story isn't just about crime. It's about power. Perception. Control. Was he a mastermind? Or just a man who got lucky time and time again? Was justice served, or bent? What do you think? Do you believe Curtis Warren was a criminal genius, or just lucky? Should the law have used prison surveillance the way they did? And is it ever possible to truly walk away from a past like his? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters here. This channel is about more than just stories. It's about truth. If you found this deep dive compelling, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode.